Gandhi said that he loved Jesus in the words he spoke. He just didn't like the way Christians acted. So one of his favorite things that really influenced his life was the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. So I'm going to go ahead and read those now. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall vile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its flavor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and be trodden under the foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it gives light unto all that are in the house. Let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. We have a little PowerPoint presentation. 1891, in June, after attending Inter-Temple Law School in the United Kingdom, Gandhi passes the bar exam and becomes a lawyer. Unknown to him at the time, his mother had passed away while he was at school. In 1893, Gandhi is thrown off of a train in South Africa for refusing to move from his first-class seat to third class, even though he had a valid first-class ticket. Such discrimination against Indians was common practice, and their personal experience gives Gandhi resolve to fight racial discrimination. 1894, Gandhi founds the National Indian Congress to oppose a bill denying Indians the right to vote in South Africa. Although the bill passes, Gandhi successfully focuses a broad range of public attention on injustices against Indians even as far away as India and in the UK. 1897, January. Landing in Durban Harbor, South Africa, Gandhi is beaten up by a mob of white settlers. His life is saved when the wife of the Durban police chief stands between Gandhi and his attackers. Because of media attention to the event, the colonial government is forced to arrest members of the mob, but Gandhi refuses to press charges. Gandhi gains increased public admiration and support. His attackers offer a public apology. 1906. The South African colonial government enacts the Asian Population Registration Act, where all residents of Asian countries, including India, had to register their name, age, address, job, and all other personal information and carry a card with their fingerprint on it. Gandhi developed his principles of nonviolent protests, satyagraha, devotion to the truth, or soul force. In 1908, August, Gandhi and 2,000 fellow Indians in Johannesburg burned their registration cards in protest. Even as Gandhi and other leaders are repeatedly arrested over 6 years of protest, nonviolent rallies continue to grow in size. In 1914, the Asian Population Registration Act is abolished. 1919, the British government passes the Rollout Act, which gives authority and power to arrest people and keep them in prison without trial if they are suspected with the charge of terrorism. The Indian National Congress starts the Hartal movement, where thousands of Indians stop working and stop selling and buying British goods in protest. Unfortunately, violent riots also occur. At Hamilstar, 379 Indians are killed and 1,000 are seriously injured. In 1920, Gandhi gets people to more intently boycott British products and encourages people to start making their own clothes rather than buying British clothing. In 1930, the British retaliate by passing the Salt Act, which makes it illegal for Indians to make their own salt, punishable by at least 3 years in jail. On March 12th, Gandhi, now 61 years old, travels 200 miles on foot for 24 days to Dundee to make his own salt. Others follow. Gandhi is again imprisoned. In 1942, Gandhi launches the Quiet Indian campaign, declaring India's independence from British rule. Gandhi is imprisoned again. 1943, a 73-year-old Gandhi starts a hunger strike that lasts for 21 days. In 1944, fearful that Gandhi would die in prison due to failing health and become a martyr, he and the other leaders are released. 1946, India becomes an independent nation. In 1947, tensions between Hindu and Muslim factions resurface and escalate into violence. India is divided into Pakistan and India. The lasting effects of the Indo-Pakistani War of 1947 still affects the geopolitics of this region. In January 12th of 1948, attempting to promote peace and asking that homes be restored to Muslims, payment to Pakistan be made for an agreement made before the Indo-Pakistani War. And fighting ceased, Gandhi, now 77 years old, starts another fast. 5 days into the fast, India makes payment to Pakistan and Hindus. Muslim and Sikh community leaders agree to renounce violence and call for peace. January 30th, 1948. Mohandas Gandhi is killed by a member of a Hindu organization angered by Gandhi's peacemaking efforts. Gandhi was shot on his way to evening prayers. His memory and teachings live on in the nonviolent peace movements of today. Western sources of Gandhi's nonviolence use Jesus, Thoreau, Ruskin, and Tolstoy. I'm going to start my story years after Gandhi's death, where it eventually led to. For the most part, it was an ordinary Thursday. Thanksgiving had been celebrated a week earlier, and now the Christmas shopping season was in full swing. At the end of her shift, a department store seamstress boarded a city bus and took a seat. An extraordinary moment came a few stops later when she refused to follow the bus driver's orders to give up her seat to a white man. For this, she was arrested. The city, Montgomery, Alabama, December 1st, 1955. As a seamstress, you may have guessed, was Rosa Parks. Her action sparked the year-long Montgomery bus boycott, which ended segregation on the city bus system. The boycott became a watershed moment in the American Civil Rights Movement. Up until that time, the struggle had been conducted primarily in the courtroom, most notably by Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP legal team. Perhaps their best-known effort was Brown versus the Board of Education Supreme Court decision in 1954. While the courtroom would remain an important venue for the movement, events in Montgomery shifted the focus to a more participatory strategy of disciplined nonviolence resistance borrowed from the Indian independence leader, Mohandas Gandhi. The boycott also propelled the young Baptist minister into national prominence, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Most Americans were only vaguely aware of Gandhi and his Satyagraha movement through occasional newspaper reports in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Many of those reports sided with British officials, at least until the Salt March in 1930. Prior to the mid-1950s, any serious American study of Gandhi's methods was limited to a few academics, social activists, members of the historic peace churches, Brethren, Friends, and Mennonites, and members of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. King's interest began during his seminary studies after hearing Dr. Mordecai Johnson, president of Howard University, speak about Gandhi's ideas following a sojourn in India. Yet this interest remained primarily an intellectual pursuit until he arrived in Montgomery. It would be the civil rights movement that popularized nonviolent resistance in the United States. King would write in his first book, Stride Toward Freedom, "As I dwelled deeper into the philosophy of Gandhi, my skepticism concerning the power of love gradually diminished, and I came to see for the first time its potency in the area of social reform. Prior to reading Gandhi, I had concluded that the ethics of Jesus was only effective in individual relationships. The turn the other cheek philosophy and love your enemies philosophy were only valid, I felt, when individuals were in conflict with another individual. When racial groups and nations were in conflict, a more realistic approach seemed necessary. But after reading Gandhi, I saw how utterly mistaken I was. Gandhi was probably the first person in history to lift the love of Jesus above mere interaction between individuals who are a powerful and effective social force on a large scale. Love for Gandhi was a potent instrument for social and collective transformation. Gandhi's direct exposure to Western ideas took place initially as a law student in London, and during 20 years as an attorney and activist in South Africa. It was in South Africa that he began to experiment with a technique he would call nonviolence resistance, in opposition to discrimination against fellow Indians. Due to those efforts, he already counted as something of a national hero when he and his family returned to India in 1915. Gandhi had grown up in a Hindu house, and indeed his mother was strongly influenced by Jainism. Yet he suggests that he knew very little about his faith when he went to England. During his years in law school, he became curious about religion and began reading books on both Hinduism and Buddhism. Through English vegetarian contacts, he was encouraged to read the Bible as well. Gandhi writes, "The New Testament produced a different impression, especially the Sermon on the Mount, which was straight to my heart. I compared it to the Gita. The verses, but I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if man take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak too. Delighted be beyond measure." As indicated in Martin Luther King's quote, many Christians over the centuries found Jesus' teachings to turn the other cheek, to love one's enemies. One way has to be to limit the application to personal relationships. Others have suggested that Jesus was only addressing his disciples, limiting their practice to the clergy. Others still have to see the passages as ideals to strive for, but impossible to fulfill. Those interpretations were convenient in a world where the church had become a powerful social institution allied with the state. However, there have always been a small number of Christians who have taken these teachings seriously. The traditional name for what we today call Christian or biblical pacifism is non-resistance. Based on the wording, resist not evil. The point was to follow the teachings of Jesus regardless of cost. Indeed, Jesus' own execution became a prime example of the principle. At one level, the idea was simply to do no harm. Even though the teachings applied to all relationships, the traditional non-resistance would not see their practice as a social strategy. They sought to be faithful. Effectiveness wasn't on their radar. While Gandhi did not become a Christian, he took the example of Christ's suffering and death very seriously. The challenge Gandhi brought to Christian pacifists was to suggest that nonviolence taught by Jesus was actually a form of resistance. To turn the other cheek and go the second mile, especially in any occupied country, is an act of courage. Further on, Jesus speaks on issues of economic life and passages, which start, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. No one can serve two masters, and do not be anxious about your life." While Gandhi spoke most often of the nonviolence themes, when he mentioned Sermon on the Mount, it is clear that he was aware of the connection between violence and economics that Jesus himself made. But Gandhi was likely not aware of Jesus' sense of economic justice rooted in the Torah, the prophetic tradition. What is hinted at in Matthew, and most obvious in Luke's Gospel, is that Jesus was committed to reviving the practice of the Jubilee cycles. The intent was to regulate the gap between wealth and poverty in tribal Israel. Some scholars suggest that Jesus was not just speaking of a general attitude of simple living and renunciation, but speaking very specifically to the fears of survival folks would have them literally living off the land during the fallow years. For Gandhi, independence from Britain was as much an economic question as it was political. Gandhi's ideas of nonviolent resistance are often associated with Henry David Thoreau on his essay on civil disobedience. Curiously, he only ran across Thoreau's work in his second imprisonment in South Africa. Thoreau's lecture and later essay was prompted by his opposition to African slavery and the U.S. war with Mexico. Many Americans at the time understood the Mexican War as an attempt to extend slavery into new territories. Thoreau refused to pay a poll tax in protest and spent 25 hours in the local jail until a friend who did not understand the principled stand he was taking paid the tax on Thoreau's behalf. While Gandhi was well on his way to the development of resistance when he encountered Thoreau, this essay did not help him develop the English vocabulary for the movement. The statement that I derived my idea of civil disobedience from the writings of Thoreau is wrong. The resistance to authority in South Africa was well advanced before I got that essay. But the movement was then known as passive resistance. It was complete, and I coined the word satyagraha for my readers. When I saw the title of Thoreau's great essay, I began to use his phrase to explain our struggle to English readers. But I found that even civil disobedience failed to convey the full meaning of the struggle. I therefore adopted the phrase civil resistance. Nonviolence was always an integral part of our struggle. While Thoreau's work did not prompt Gandhi's initial actions, it did lend significant moral support to his position. He often recommended reading Thoreau. The third Western influence on Gandhi's thought is John Ruskin, who was an artist, art critic, and essayist in Victorian England. He was roughly a rough contemporary with Thoreau. He wrote a series of essays on economics. The extremely negative response by readers forced the publisher to cut the series short at 4 installments. 2 years later, Ruskin published essays in a collection titled Until This Last. The literary references to Jesus' parable about the laborers in the vineyard. In the story, the landlord has hired day laborers to work in his vineyard at various times throughout the day. Those hired early in the day are promised a denarius, which was considered a fair living wage. Those hired later were promised that they would receive what was right, including those who were hired during the final hour. Each worker received the same amount as those hired earlier in the day. As everyone lined up to be paid at the end of the day, some complained. The landowner responded, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last as I give to you." His essay was a critique of 18th, 19th century industrial capitalism. He believed that value resided in human labor, not things. Economics is really about relationships between people and communities, not so much about the trafficking of goods. He believed in an equal wage for all members of society, regardless of rank. Gandhi made some lifestyle choices in response to reading Ruskin. He organized an intentional community in South Africa, which became known as Phoenix Farm. Each member of the community drew an equal wage, regardless of their outside employment. Also, everyone was expected to participate in manual labor, regardless of profession or social status. One of the classic examples was raking and covering the trees. Even Gandhi did it. Lev Tolstoy would have been the most influence on Gandhi. This was in part because they were able to make contact with each other through a series of letters late in Tolstoy's life. Tolstoy had worldwide fame as one of the great 19th century Russian novelists, and is likely still best known among us today for his fiction. Later in his life, he had something of a conversion experience. As something of a seeker, he had read sacred literature of Hindu and Buddhist faith. However, his dramatic shift came after reading the Christian Gospels. He began to embrace the ethical teachings of Jesus, especially as found in the Sermon on the Mount. For the most part, he rejected the mystical teachings in the institutional church. He published a work in 1884 titled What I Believe. Due to his fame, the book got wide distribution. This would lead to excommunication by the Russian Orthodox Church. It also put him in correspondence with numerous people around the globe, including American Quakers and the Mennonites. In 1894, he published another book on faith, The Kingdom of God is Within You. It was written as a reply to his critics, specifically defending his position on non-resistance. Early during his sojourn in South Africa, Gandhi was introduced to Tolstoy's The Kingdom of God is Within You by a Quaker friend, referred to as Mr. Coates. Gandhi says in his autobiography that the book overwhelmed me. It left an impression on me. Before the independent thinking, profound morality, and the truthfulness of this book, all books given to me by Mr. Coates seem to pale in insignificance. Gandhi would start a brief correspondence with Tolstoy near the end of the author's life, initially seeking permission to reprint a short work, sometimes titled A Letter Addressed to a Hindu, but also known as the title Conception of India, Its Cause and Its Cure. It was Tolstoy's response to an Indian who asked advice on overthrowing British rule in India. He noted that using violence or terrorism would only replace one evil with another. He also pointed out that if 30,000 Englishmen had enslaved 200 million Indians, perhaps the Indians had enslaved themselves. The aged author was delighted with Gandhi's request and enthusiastically gave his permission. Later, Tolstoy received a copy of Gandhi's book, India Home Rule. In a sense, the Russian novelist was aware before his death that the mantle of nonviolence had been passed to a new generation. Tolstoy wrote his final letter to Gandhi in September of 1910, one of his last lengthy letters to anyone, 2 months before his death. Waiting and anticipation and hope are an important part of what gives us meaning. However, for most people, it is more an exercise in remembering the birth of Jesus by common shepherds and exotic magi from distant lands, rather than looking forward. Yes, we need heroes, saints, and good examples in our lives, and we even need patience, because real substantive change does not happen overnight. However, waiting for someone else to take the first step before we do is a cop-out. We are the ones we are waiting for. Please stand and say we shall overcome. 169.